Welcome to the Transformation Playbook with Akin, where we unlock the keys to personal leadership and personal growth and community transformation that multiplies global impact. I'm your host, Akin Anibaba, and I help individuals and organizations turn their vision into reality by igniting internal change that radiates outwards. And so today's episode is for anyone who has ever felt stuck, uncertain, overlooked, or who knows deep down that there is more in me that needs to come out. If you want to discover the power of renewing your mind and how it is a gateway to maximize your full potentials, then this episode is for you. And I want to start with talking about how your mind is your battlefield. In the previous episodes, we've reviewed my story so far and my challenge in college, step by step until I got to the police station. But I want to take back and peel back some of the critical moments that will help us understand why renewing your mind is very, very important, or it's an important step in any form or path to transformation. Well, let's start with this truth. In Romans chapter 12, verse 2, Scripture tells us, do not be conformed by the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's how you get transformed, by the renewing of your mind. So if your life is supposed to change, if your business is supposed to change, if you are supposed to elevate in your leadership skills, it starts in the realms of your mind. You don't change your life by changing your behavior. You don't change your life by just changing your habits. It starts from the place of the mind. Wherever your mind goes, your life will follow. And so we all remember in my story when I was reiterating in the previous episodes that, I fought lack and want, hardship, repeated failures to finally gain admission into college, if we all remember. That day was a moment of jubilation, not just for me, but for my entire family. And as the firstborn of the family, I was carrying the hopes of the entire family, to start a brand new generation of change agents, right? So, but within a few years, I found myself sidetracked. I found myself lost, partying, following the crowd, letting go of every single value that my parents had instilled in me at that point. I didn't even realize how far I drifted until the night that I was nearly killed by a mob. I was mistaken for someone else in a violent attack on campus. So lying in the hospital bed, my head bandaged, all bloodied up, my friends had abandoned me. It really hit me that night. It hit me that I'd been living off a wrong and outdated mindset. I conformed to the pattern around the world around me, and it cost me dearly. I'm going to stop there and dive into the power of renewing your mind, because it was that night that it truly dawned on me where I was. A mindset that's not updated is soon to become outdated, whether it's your journey, your personal journey, whether it's your business, whether it's in your organization or in your leadership role, or even nation building. It starts from the mind. You see, that night wasn't just a wake-up call for me. It was a divine intervention. And so transformation doesn't begin with behavior. It really begins in your mind. It really begins in your mind. Your mindset is the pilot of your destiny. It's the pilot of your vision. If you're doing ministry, if it's your organization, if it's your business, if it's nation business, it's your mind. Wherever your mind goes, your life will follow. And so if you're stuck today, whether in your career, your organization, it might even be your relationship. I want to challenge you. Get your mind out, and your life will definitely follow. We don't rise to the levels of our goals, but we rise or we fall to the level of our thinking. And so, I'm sure some of you are wondering, how does this renewal of the mindset really pertain to me if I feel stuck? Whether it's my business, my organization, nation building, my relationships. Well, let's start with organizations and businesses. A company's culture and results are shaped by the collective mindsets of their leadership. If an organization conforms to outdated patterns of operation, with time it will show. A mindset that is not updated, remember, is soon to be outdated. So it's key in leadership positions. It's key when it comes to your business. It's key when it comes to your organization. Companies must renew their thinking to how they treat talent, to innovation, even to customer experience. So leadership must challenge limiting beliefs. You will hear some people say, we've always done it this way. Oh no, change is risky, or failure is fatal. But wherever your mind goes, your business or your organization follows. I remember Blockbuster ignoring the rising tide of digital streaming, and they had to pay the price because they got conformed with the patterns of the world around them, their culture, and did not renew their mind. And so when it comes to leadership as well, the mindset of a leader sets the ceiling for an organization. A leader with a locked mindset will be locking the destiny of that company. And so I hope you're following me. We do not rise to the level of our goals, but we rise or we fall to the level of our thinking. And so when it comes to nation building as well, nations rise or collapse, not just based on resources, but based on how their citizens and their leaders think. A society plagued by corruption, division, dependency is often shaped by conformed patterns of generational mindsets. If you can change your thinking, you can change your life. If you can change the thinking of your leaders and your citizens, you can change your nation. And so my situation in college, I needed a personal transformation. But that night in the hospital woke me up to know that the mindset that got me there was not going to be the mindset that was required to pull me out. And that applies to every facet of life, whether in your leadership, whether in your business, whether you're running ministry, or you're doing nation building. Wherever your mind is, your life or your goals or your vision will follow. And so, a closed mindset cannot walk into open doors. And that's the truth. And that's why I started with that truth that said, do not be conformed with the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It's not just a one-time thing. It's a continuous process. And so for me, I had to renew my mindset. It was a wake-up call for me, realizing that the mindset that had me distracted from my goals, my vision, was not going to be what will pull me out. And something had to change. A shift had to happen. And so I'll be sharing with you in this episode some of the principles required to execute a renewal of your mind. One practical realization when you're trying to engage the power of the renewal of the mind is to realize that your setback is actually your setup. In my case, I had a serious setback in college. I was attacked. I faced a panel. I was suspended indefinitely. Uncertainty. It was a setback for me. And so that wasn't the end for me. After recovering, I was still suspended from school. Like I said, 1 year away from graduating. That was devastating. Everything was on the line. So I was devastated, but I was determined. I was in my darkest place when God found me again. And so what happened to me in my own personal story? My mom came in, my mom visited me, and my mom led me to Christ. That was the day the seed of mind renewal was planted in me. And so without the renewal of the mind, or without the way you think, nothing can really be done. And so here's what I learned. You can't experience a new future with an old mindset. You can't experience a new future with an old mindset. I wanted a change. I desired a change. So I couldn't stop. I couldn't continue thinking the way I used to think when I was hanging with the wrong crew. You want a change in your organization. Yes, you can't keep thinking the same way. You can't experience a new future. You can't experience a change with an old mindset in your ministry, with your team that you're leading. In terms of nation building, you can't experience a new future with an old mindset. You can't step into your breakthrough while carrying a broken mental framework. You just can't. And so, being able to steward your mind to see the change that you desire is extremely important. Until you change your mind, you really cannot change your life. Until you change your mind, you can't really change your situation. And so when my mom led me to Christ, it took deep, deep thoughts. I started retracing my steps. I started thinking, understanding, people pleasing, trying to be among the thinking. I started understanding my old thinking patterns. I started realizing the right way to start thinking, or the thinking patterns I needed to derive to see the change I desired. So never let your setback define you. Whether in your personal life, in your business, never let your personal setback. Don't let it define you, but let it refine you. Let it refine you. Now, I've shared a personal story. I've shared how a setback can be a setup from a personal standpoint. But let's take a look at it. Somebody's probably wondering, what has that got to do with my business? How does that impact my business? How can a personal renewal of mind or your mindset affect your business? Or how can it help me improve my business or my organization? I remember a company called Kodak. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember Kodak. And, used to process films with a roll of 35mm film, or they had the one-time instant camera that they used to take shots. And I remember they having failed launches, right? Market disruption. It's because they didn't renew their mindset towards the new trends. Kodak was once the leader in photography, but they failed to adapt to the new digital revolution, and it cost them. So the setback of becoming irrelevant could have been their setup for reinvention. But they didn't take advantage in trying to renew their mindset to align so they could be reinvented, and they just packed up and went out of business. So the renewal of your mindset is extremely, very, very important. Very, very important. I can also mention Netflix transitioning from DVDs to digital streaming. It takes the renewal of a mindset. All right. How about from a leadership standpoint? Great leaders are not defined by their perfect records, but by how they respond to crisis. That's how leaders are defined. Great leaders. How do they respond to crisis? A leadership setback, whether public failure, internal conflict, or poor decisions, can become a setup to bounce back. But it takes the renewal of the mind. It takes the renewal of the mind. I actually remember the story of, I think it was Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks. You know, he stepped aside from leadership for a while, and then when he came back into some crisis. You know, the business was going down, and he had to shut down 7,100 stores. Somebody hearing that they need to shut down 7,100 stores would actually assume that that person is crazy. But he did it for a good reason. He had a mindset shift. He realized that they needed to train their employees, change the products for their different demographic areas. And when that was done and executed, boom, Starbucks was reinvented. And so it takes a mindset shift, a mindset that is not set on limitations, but on possibilities. And that takes the renewal of your mind. Oh, somebody said, how does that affect nation building? Well, nations go through economic downturns sometimes, leadership failures, civil unrest. But lasting transformation never begins with policies or programs. It always begins with a renewed national mindset. I remember the example of Rwanda. After the 1994 genocide attack, it took the renewal of the mind of both their leader, their president at that time, and the people, the citizens, to change, to begin to implement rebuilding policies, women empowerment. And look at Rwanda today, one of the fastest upcoming economies in Africa, as well as one of the cleanest nations in Africa. And so the renewal of the mind is critical to your personal journey, to your leadership, to your company, your businesses, every facet of life.